I've been asked the question as to why we should encourage mothers to breastfeed their babies. And I think that in the past we've looked at infant formula feeding as being equivalent to breastfeeding, and that's far from the truth. In fact, infant formula is quite different to mother's milk, has different components in it, and the only reason we can get away with feeding infant formula is that we have very hygienic communities. As soon as you go to non-hygienic communities, infant formula is an absolute disaster. Nevertheless, if we look at the proportion of babies, for example, getting diarrhoea from infant formula in our society, it's about a similar proportion to the babies in developing countries. The difference is that they have poor health service, so in the developing country the baby dies. In our country we can treat these babies and they survive. So infant formula is a very poor substitute for breast milk. Breast milk has very strong antimicrobial components in it, and that are some of the first aspects to evolve as lactation evolved. So the protection of the young is a vitally important component from breast milk. Its nutritional values are particularly tailored to the needs of the baby and are quite different to the nutritional values that are required from a calf or from a dairy cow. The cow feeds very infrequently, feeds a calf infrequently, and goes out and grazes lots of grass over periods of time. So a cow produces a milk that curds in the calf's stomach and then releases nutrients over a long period of time. On the other hand, the human mother feeds frequently, has a soft curd in its milk, passes through the baby's intestine quickly, so it can feed every hour without a problem, or more than every hour without a problem. So there's a multitude of different compositional factors when we're looking at different milk from different species. And we tend to look at the benefits that the baby receives from breastfeeding, but there's also many benefits that the mother receives from breastfeeding. For example, the risk of osteoporosis is less in mothers who breastfeed. Of course, calcium pours out of the mother's bones into the milk, but as she weans, this calcium gets put back into the bones again, and they actually end up better off than when they initially had their babies, so they have less osteoporosis in older age. It prevents or reduces the rate of many cancers, particularly ovarian cancer. It reduces the risk of heart attacks when you breastfeed. And it's generally dose responsive. The more breastfeeding you've done, the more protection you get. So even from a mother's point of view, it's a very good idea to breastfeed your baby. And now we're getting data coming out in terms of the improvement of the IQ of the baby, their ability to perform at school, and that you get significant differences between formula-fed and babies that are fed breast milk. But importantly, it's dose dependent. The longer the breastfeeding the baby receives, the more significantly better is its IQ. It does better at reading, mathematics, and teachers rate breastfed babies better than they rate formula-fed babies. So, and when we look at obesity, breastfeeding is protective against obesity. Again, dose related. The longer the breastfeeding, the more protection the baby has against becoming obese. There's a whole lot of reasons why mothers should consider breastfeeding their babies. But then there are the sort of issues, social issues that we have that make it quite difficult for mothers to breastfeed. Attitudes towards breastfeeding in public. Breastfeeding was always meant to be done in public. The very hormone that's stimulated by breastfeeding is the hormone that drives our socialisation. It drives us to socialise with people. So it's not meant to be done in private, it's meant to be done when other people are around, and that's obvious when we understand that girls learn to breastfeed by watching other mothers breastfeed. So if they have an opportunity to learn that skill, and the first time they go to breastfeed their baby is when they give birth to their own baby, obviously they're going to have problems. So we need a more open society, and that's pretty difficult to achieve. We're starting to achieve it in Australia, but to make mothers be able to breastfeed in public and feel comfortable about it is quite a challenge. So, and I think on the other hand, we need government legislation. We've got to show that the political people understand the importance of breastfeeding. Again, in Australia, our nutritional guidelines for what people should eat has included breastfeeding since the early 1980s. And it's obvious that breastfeeding should be the start of our nutritional guidelines, but very few countries have breastfeeding as a nutritional guideline. We need to have some of the laws that are important in Australia are the Anti-Discrimination Act. You can't discriminate against women for breastfeeding, and that has a lot of implications to it, because women cannot be asked to leave a shop or a bus or an open space if they're breastfeeding, because it's actually against the law to do that. And I think that facilitates mothers to breastfeed when you've got the right legislation. And probably the last and most important area is proper information. Most doctors are very poorly educated on human lactation. They know very little about it, and they can't treat a problem with the breast the way they treat the problem with any other organ in the body. So we've got to facilitate the education of the doctors, but that is not so simple, because we actually don't have the research basis of our understanding of the breast that we have for other organs in the body. So it's no use just criticising the doctors if we can't give them the tools that they need to be able to assist women that have breastfeeding problems. And the first thing we need is a test of breast function. So every other organ in the body has tests of function. Why not the breast? And it's a very important organ in the body. So I think that we have to increase the actual scientific knowledge of the health professionals and doctors to get a really good outcome. But at the end of the day, the way this breastfeeding has moved in all Western countries is from the grassroots movements of organisations like the HA League and the Australian Breastfeeding Association, and such movements of mothers getting together, being informed about breastfeeding, and then challenging things in the society that are making it difficult for mothers to breastfeed. So I think it's in every country the momentum has come from the mothers on the ground to improve breastfeeding outcomes.